What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to my Week 12 NFL Power Rankings. We got a lot of good football in Week 11 that we're going to react to here in this video. Before we get started, though, please do hit that like button down below. Really helps me out with the algorithms and the views and all that YouTube mumbo jumbo, but just really helps support my channel, so I appreciate you taking a second to hit that like button down below. Also, if you enjoy the video, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss any great football content as we head into the rest of this season. And let's go ahead and get started. At the bottom of the rankings, we actually have a new team at the bottom, and it's going to be the Detroit Lions. And it's much more about just the Texans picked up a win this week. Nothing has really changed about Detroit. They had a scrappy loss against the Browns, just like most of their games this season. And that does mean the Houston Texans are climbing up to number 31 here, taking down the beat-up Tennessee Titans, I should say. But Tyrod Taylor back out there this week, and, you know, team comes away with a win a game. First time since week 1, and maybe not the worst team in the NFL right now. And then the New York Jets staying put at number 30. I will say it was really fun to see Elijah Moore become heavily integrated into the offense. Joe Flacco, hey, he was like serviceable for Jets standards, I suppose, but you know, this is what this Jet season is going to be, is finding out what kind of building blocks they have for the future, and getting Elijah Moore heavily involved in the offense this week, I think, is something to build upon as you move forward. So just looking for some positivity amidst a disastrous season in Robert Saleh's first year. And then I am going to actually drop the Jacksonville Jaguars into this bottom tier, and that will wrap up the garbage bottom feeder tier here. But man, Urban Meyer, it's just another week where we're sitting here like, what is it that you do here? Because this offense continues to find no identity. Like we said with the Jets, a season like this is supposed to be about finding what building blocks you have for the future. And I don't think running trick, gimmicky plays to get the ball in Jamal Agnew's hands, who's now injured, is really the best thing for the future of this team. Trevor Lawrence isn't getting any better. I guess the defense is doing some cool stuff, but ultimately the Jaguars are having what you call a train wreck of a season. But let's move on out of the bottom tier there and into a group of really non-playoff teams at this point, but at least more competitive than those bottom 4. And that starts with the New York Giants, who, if you weren't like me and felt like the Giants season was over before it even started, well, at least after Monday Night Football, you can say the Giants season is officially done. I mean, this team just has so much work to do. At least they have an extra first-round pick from the Bears that's looking like a potential top 10 pick right now if you want a saving grace. But quarterback, an issue. Offensive line, an issue. Defense, lacking star talent. Just so, like I said, I don't know where you go if you're the Giants at this point. It's rough. Same with the Atlanta Falcons. And the Falcons aren't even in purgatory, because that would imply that there's a little bit more good than they're getting right now. They're just stuck in franchise hell. They have a 36-year-old quarterback that 2 out of 3 weeks looks like a pile of garbage trying to throw the football. Their defense has no talent. Their offensive line's a disaster. Their number 1 receiver, you know, with being sensitive and understanding, he's having issues being on the field, which from a football perspective is a problem. Their number 4 overall pick, they can't find a way to get him integrated into the offense, even though he looks super talented when they do try him. They're just a mess. They're a mess. And Arthur Smith and the new GM, they have such a long way to go before we even feel good about them being the right men in charge. Let's move on. The Miami Dolphins are next. They're going to move up 1. You know, they played a complete game against the New York Jets and did what any NFL team that plays a complete game against the New York Jets will do, and that is win. You know, I don't think Tua looked good this week. They still have a ton of issues in Miami themselves, but it's 2 in a row, so something for Dolphins fans to celebrate, unless their minds are already ahead to the draft. And then the Washington football team are actually going to climb up 3 this week. They have been legitimately impressive the last couple weeks. They beat the Bucs, which is impressive for anybody. And then this week coming out and Taylor Heinicke playing incredible, man. He was one of the best quarterbacks this week. Now, I do have a caveat here. You know, he has that gunslinger mentality. I don't think it's reasonable to expect that Taylor Heinicke every week. I would frankly expect him to regress hard in the coming weeks, which is why I'm not going to overreact to a couple of good weeks by him and his football team. But the defense is playing a little bit better. They're flying around, tackling better. They're doing some nice stuff. They're going to move up 3. They're not going to make the playoffs or anything like that, but they're much more competitive now than they were several weeks ago. And then the Bears dropping down 3 spots. I mean, you got to score points in the NFL, man. They've been wildly unimpressive over the last few months. They've had some highlights in there. They've had good defensive weeks. Hell, they've had good offensive moments as well, with Justin Fields showing those flashes. But this week, none of that. Andy Dalton in the lineup there. They basically survive offensively off of screen plays, and Darnell Mooney being really fast. But that's not an offense. That's a player making a few plays one week. They just have no offensive identity. Matt Nagy, it's over, I think. And I think 24 or lower, honestly, is the right spot for the Chicago Bears. Then the Carolina Panthers, fortunate enough to stay put this week. I think there's a couple things boding towards them not dropping here, I guess I would say. Number one is they were unfortunate to get Taylor Heinicke playing Super Saiyan version out of his mind experience this week. And also the Bears, I think, are just a much more unimpressive football team. And the Panthers did some good stuff this week. I thought Cam Newton coming in, first week as a starter, actually played better than I expected. It is not easy to step in and learn a playbook and start for a team within a week. And he did a good job. He avoided mistakes. He pushed the ball downfield a little bit. And this defense has shown that they can and will play better moving forward. They've been one of the more impressive defenses this week. But just like all defenses, if you run into a hot quarterback, you're screwed. Welcome to the NFL in 2021. So it was a bad week for them, but they're actually going to stay put in the power rankings. And I think they're still in the mix in the wild card. But that is a tough game to lose for playoff standings and stuff. Okay, the Denver Broncos are going to stay put. They were on bye this week, but a busy bye week as they extend Courtland Sutton to what I view is going to be a bargain as soon as he has a consistent quarterback to get him the production he's capable of. And Tim Patrick, an unsung hero for the Denver Broncos, an underrated player. Good to see him getting picked up by his team. So a busy free agent week for the Denver Broncos, locking up what is, moving forward, one of the better receiving cores in the league. Then we have the Seattle Seahawks going to drop down 3 spots and out of the playoff contender tier. This is a disaster. I mean, odds favorite has to be towards this being Pete Carroll's last year for the Seahawks. And it's weird because the defense is actually playing all right. But what's crazy is this was actually a better team with Geno Smith out there than Russell Wilson, who's playing terrible right now. And the offense after the first month of the season has not been able to get back to the explosiveness that they showed with the new scheme in there. So the Seahawks are a mess. There's almost no chance to make the playoffs at this point. Their schedule's tough. They couldn't beat Colt McCoy in the Cardinals this week. Just terrible, man. Seahawks are in transition at this point. And then the New Orleans Saints, after they beat the Bucs, I dropped them about 6 spots and said their season was done with Jameis Winston out. Even then, I couldn't have imagined that Ryan Ramczyk and Alvin Kamara was going to get injured and their offense would get to this level. But they're just no good right now, and that defense can only do so much. It's an unfortunate season for the Saints. Maybe they can regroup and be back in the mix next year, but it does feel like their season is kind of done at this point. And then we got the Philadelphia Eagles heating up, man. They're an interesting team. They actually have a very underrated, talented roster. I think Nick Sirianni has proved that he can at least craft an offense around his players, his talent. They have a creative run game. They lean into Devontae Smith. He allows Jalen Hurts to kind of run around and make plays, and the defense is doing some really good things as well. Darius Slay is back to kind of playing like a top 10 corner, which is huge for them after what they've invested in him. So, the Eagles look like a decently well-coached team with a lot of talent at critical positions: receiver, pass rush, offensive line. Jordan Mailata, one of the just best foresight moves of any front office in the last year or so. I mean, this guy was an average tackle replacement level tackle with a ton of upside, and they gave him a big unexpected contract, and now he seems like he's going to be playing on a value deal. Jordan Mailata at left tackle for a while now. So if you look at the moves Howie Roseman has made over the last 300 days or so, he's really revitalized the Philadelphia Eagles and has reminded us of how good of a general manager he is after being in a bit of a slump there. 2018, 2019, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside over DK Metcalf. Okay, Oakland, Las Vegas Raiders moving up a spot despite the loss against the Bengals. Part of this is I really dropped them last week because I thought they were bad, and they were bad. They kind of played like the team I expected this week. So I guess my opinion on them hasn't changed too much. And part of this is the Seahawks were just even more uninspiring. But the Raiders are officially out of the playoff tier, so they are losing ground in that regard. This team is much more in this chaotic cluster of bad football teams than they are in this crowded cluster coming up of teams that are, playoff contender types of teams. That's not the Raiders right now, man. Their defense is completely fallen apart. The offense with Derek Carr has been bad for multiple weeks now, ever since the Henry Ruggs situation shook down. Obviously, John Gruden out. Their coaching is reeling and failing to adapt. It's a mess for the Raiders. And like I said last week, I don't see this team picking up a lot more wins as we move forward. Okay, then we have a tier gap up, as mentioned, into playoff contenders, and that starts with the San Francisco 49ers. Tip of the cap to Kyle Shanahan, a couple of huge wins in a row. Obviously not that impressive to beat the Jags, that's why they're staying put, but they did jump up after upsetting the Niners on Monday Night Football. For those of you that caught last week's podcast, we did that. But yeah, the offense with Kittle out there, Garoppolo healthy, Shanahan back in a groove, Debo is going off, Brandon Ayuk getting involved. They got plenty of pieces, man. They run block really well, and defensively they're just solid. Like, they're not a great defense, and that's probably, you've Jimmy Garoppolo as your quarterback. You don't have an elite defense. It's going to limit their upside a little bit. But I do think the Niners are heading hot and heavy towards probably the 7 seed in the NFC, and they could play spoiler, just as they did against the Rams on Monday Night Football last week. So things are good in San Francisco, and the fire Kyle Shanahan discussions can stop, because I really thought those were an overreaction there when that was going down. Then the Cleveland Browns just falling so quickly here, man. They were looking earlier on in the season like a team poised for a Super Bowl run, and God, it's falling apart, man. Baker's beat up mentally, physically, you name it, and the offense just can't create explosive plays right now. They can run the ball. They have a good screen game. They have a great offensive line. Jarvis in the short game, but they don't have receivers that can get open downfield. Baker's really struggling to push the ball into those areas of the field. So they got issues, but I still really like their defense. I like their run game. I like Stefanski. I think they have a really good certain floor about them, but I do think that lack of a ceiling without the explosive nature of their offense does really hurt their ability to make a Super Bowl run here. And even, playoffs are in question for the Browns. But they do pick up a win this week, although an uninspiring win against Detroit. Then we have the Pittsburgh Steelers dropping down 3 spots. This is more about other teams being more impressive, honestly. It was not an entirely bad outing against the Chargers in a game that they weren't expected to win. It did take some late game heroics and a choke job by the Chargers for the Steelers to kind of get back into it, because they were dominated for the first half plus of this game. And then again, in the 2-minute drill, you saw the deficiencies of this offense with Big Ben running the show. So they're another team like Cleveland that has a great defense and some limitations offensively. And then the Minnesota Vikings, +2. They have just hung around, and they've started to win close games. That was the thing with the Vikings earlier on in the season, was they were super competitive, but they couldn't close. In the last couple weeks, they've done that. And none bigger than this week against Green Bay at home. And you just got to tip your cap to Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. The passing game opening up for the Minnesota Vikings. You hope Mike Zimmer can open his eyes and see the value that the passing game has here and not get overly too reliant on the run moving forward. But yeah, man, the Vikes just under the radar, like have a super explosive passing game when they decide to air it out. And a big part of that is Kirk Cousins is better than he gets credit for, and Justin Jefferson is a top 5 receiver in the NFL right now. So +2 for the Vikings. They are on a fast track for one of those wild card spots, and they're a dangerous team. You know, they certainly have their issues, but a huge win this week against Green Bay to kind of put their foot down and cement themselves as a front runner for that 6th and 7th wildcard spots, I would just say. And then the Tennessee Titans here dropping down 6. You know, I don't like to come off as a jerk in these power rankings, but when fans are a jerk towards me, I don't feel as bad saying I told you so. I had the Titans 7th last week, still pretty high, still in that AFC mix, just as they still are, but I did leave them out of my top tier because I said that this offense just ain't it, man. You can't lean on Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown to be the sole identity of your entire offense. They have no run game. Their play action has completely died, and they just don't have a counterpunch with Tannehill and A.J. Brown. So, no, it's not all their fault. They have a ton of injuries right now, but this is where they sit here right now, is a team that's in the AFC mix. They're a team that can play spoiler, but they're a team that can have really bad days as well and lose to a team as bad as the Houston Texans, as they did this week. So they're going to drop down 6. They're right in this kind of middle cluster of playoff caliber teams, and they got to get healthy and figure out what this offense can be without Derrick Henry before the Indianapolis Colts catch them in the standings, because we aren't even doing the Colts yet. We're going to be doing the Bengals next at number 12. What an impressive win off the bye week. It's not always easy to come out and play the way they did on the road, nonetheless, coming off that bye week. And the run game was strong. The defense got back into it. So the Bengals hopefully resuming where they were after they beat the Ravens and were, you know, in that close game against the Packers, and not back to that team that in their 2 weeks before the bye week had 2 really bad losses. So a huge week for the Bengals, getting them right back into this AFC playoff picture, gaining ground in the division this week. And yeah, +1 for the Bengals. And then the Indianapolis Colts +4, back to that 11th ranking that I had for them coming into the season. So it feels right. This team looks much more like the healthy version of themselves that I was hoping we would see. You know, they run the ball at an elite level. They're really leaning into Jonathan Taylor. What did he have, 35 carries this week? I thought they would maybe hold back a little bit, but part of that was I think they were going to save him for a playoff run, and this is their playoff run. They have too much ground to make up to waste time giving the ball to Marlon Mack. So I respect that. They're leaning into their best offensive player. And then defensively, they're just so sound, man. You've got a D-line that just doesn't give up big stuff. They play such a solid blanket-style scheme. They force teams to take the underneath stuff and, you know, execute 8 to 10 plays per drive to beat you defensively. They force you to make mistakes, and they don't make them themselves. And when you're playing a Josh Allen, that's a really good strategy. That's why I picked the Colts to win this game against the Bills. So +4 for the Colts. I still think they're a relatively matchup-dependent teams, but that's like the entire AFC. So a huge week for the Indianapolis Colts. And honestly, at this point, with the way the Titans are playing right now, the division is not out of reach. So they are actually, in my opinion, at this point in time, a better team than the Tennessee Titans, despite being a couple games behind them in the standings. And then the LA Chargers at number 10. This is going to start our next tier of teams that I can at least mentally picture winning a Super Bowl. And with the Chargers, that's kind of where they've been, because I do think they have really high upside any given week. And we saw some of that this week with Bosa going off, that defense that has some holes but can make plays. And then when Justin Herbert is hot, they are incredibly explosive offensively. So a huge win against the Steelers. Another big moment for them to have kind of that team culture, get over the hump moment. This has been a thing with the Chargers, is late game collapses, losing close games, going back to last year. Well, the perseverance to hang in there and execute down the stretch. Yes, a blown coverage was a little bit of a help to them at the end of this game, but they executed throughout. So +1 for the LA Chargers. And then the Baltimore Ravens at number 9, they pick up a win against the Bears, and that's really impressive considering Lamar Jackson, they were probably hoping was going to play. But the defense really hung in there, kept them in this game. They made enough plays offensively and got a team culture win without Lamar Jackson. So just they're going to stay put, but it was an impressive week for the Baltimore Ravens. The only reason they're not moving up is because the New England Patriots have been even more impressive. What they've done the last couple of weeks, really the last month, this is such a Belichick thing. This reminds me of so many of those Tom Brady Patriots teams where they started really slow, but then Belichick found out where his strengths were on defense, started to deploy the right schemes on that side of the ball, and blows up. And then they've also gotten their offensive line back healthy, which has reopened up the offense. They've got a great run game right now with multiple backs that can really scoot and run with some power. And then Mac Jones settling in, like I keep saying, looking like a 5-year vet, taking what's there, finding out Hunter Henry, Kendrick Bourne, those are the identities of the passing game, which is enough. And yeah, the Patriots are towards the top of the AFC right now, and they're just one spot now behind the Buffalo Bills with a tough loss against the Colts. Again, football is a game of matchups, and I picked the Colts for a reason. I thought they matched up incredibly well with the Buffalo Bills because of the style they play with on defense, forced Josh Allen to make 8 to 10, well-executed plays in a drive, whereas the Bills, they really feed off of big plays, and the Colts were not going to give them up. Also, the Colts able to run the ball against that squishy Buffalo front. The Bills are more of that modern Chiefs-style, explosive offense, pass-oriented defense. They're not going to bode well against a team like the Colts. So I'm not going to overreact, but I'm definitely worried. Josh Allen is showing that he's not great at putting together multiple weeks of consistent performances. He's not great at executing 10 straight plays without making a mental mistake. So there are holes in the Buffalo Bills that are actually going to drop them down a tier for me this week. I would be worried about the Bills getting the right matchups, because I think against a team like the Patriots, against a team like the Colts or the Ravens, that they're going to be seeing in the playoffs teams that run the ball really well, teams like Cleveland as well, even the Pittsburgh Steelers, who showed week 1 that they match up well against the Steelers team. They have certain weaknesses that, unfortunately for them, a lot of the teams in the AFC, even the Titans as well, are worth noting there when they get Derrick Henry back in the playoffs. A lot of these AFC teams are built to pound the ball down the Bills' throat and force Josh Allen to have complete drives. So it's something to keep an eye on. They're obviously an incredibly high upside team any given week, but they can lose to some of these more physical-minded teams with great run games and sound defenses. But now we're into the top 6 and a little bit of change here. So the Cowboys are going to come down 3. This is now 2 of 3 weeks. They've been really underwhelming, and Dak has not played like the MVP favorite that I said he was last week. I have a real nature for cursing guys into having bad games after I give them the MVP at that point in the season. The defense still played pretty well against the Chiefs, but obviously you're concerned about the Cowboys' ability to develop counterpunches offensively, that they maybe are a little bit too dependent on CeeDee Lamb making spectacular plays, which with the concussion this week and the Chiefs matching him up, they weren't able to do that. They've got a tough match on Thursday for Thanksgiving. We'll see. They might not have CeeDee Lamb. They might not have Amari Cooper. And Dak's going to have to prove that he can come out and play at that elite level even without these top receivers. And then the Kansas City Chiefs right back here into the top 5, into the Super Bowl picture. 3 weeks ago, I said, gun to my head, I would still pick the Chiefs to win the AFC, and I think now even more so. I mean, the defense has settled in just as I expected it to, and offensively, they are still working some things out, but they have really learned with Clyde Edwards-Helaire in there with their run game. They can actually take a little bit off of Mahomes' plate, which I think will be really healthy for him moving into cold weather games and into December football. They can run the ball, man. Their running backs are fine, but their offensive line, they're maulers. They're one of the best, if not the best, run blocking group in the entire league, and they're playing better defense, which allows them to get into that. So that's just a much more comfortable situation for Mahomes. Every analytic in the world will show you how much a run game can support a quarterback, and a guy like Patrick Mahomes getting supported, that's a very good thing. So then we have the Green Bay Packers dropping down 3. Not a good week for them. Not so much because of the loss. You know, the Vikings played a really good game. You obviously don't like to see the Packers defense take a step back, but no Rashawn Gary, no Zadarius Smith, no Jair Alexander. Those are pieces that should be in the lineup here pretty soon. What was really disappointing for the Packers this week is they lost Elton Jenkins for the season. And it's a theme throughout these power rankings always is when you lose a superstar player for the season, it's going to hurt your outlook just a little bit. I mean, that's a big loss. Now, they're still in the top tier for me. I thought Aaron Rodgers played a great game, made some big-time throws, got MVS going, which was huge. That should help their offense moving forward, but they did lose Elton Jenkins. Hopefully get Bakhtiari to plug into that left tackle spot soon, but just in general, not a great week for the Green Bay Packers, whose injuries are totally stacking up. They're going to have their hands full against the Rams this Sunday, who are going to come in number 3 on bye this week. And I think this is a huge week for the Rams. 2 losses in a row, the bye week, a full week to integrate Odell Beckham. They got to come out and really prove this ranking right. I think they will against Green Bay, who's reeling with injuries right now. The Rams are at home. But obviously 2 losses in a row, moving them up +3 this week is a bit of a bold move. But I really like how that defense shapes up moving forward. Stafford's in a little bit of a slump, but I think he can shake it and start playing better football. And the Rams will be right in that top of the NFC as we enter the home stretch here. And then the Arizona Cardinals gonna stay put at number 2. I just want Kyler back, man. I just want Kyler back. But this team, 2 wins now against good football teams, Seattle and San Francisco, without Kyler Murray. It's impressive stuff. But let's see Kyler out there so we can really see what this team is now as we get close to December. And then the Tampa Bay Bucks are going to reclaim the number 1 spot. We had a fun time with Tom Brady not being on the best team in the NFL, but I think with Sean Murphy-Bunting back this week, the defense playing better, getting Gronk back into the lineup, who made some plays against the Giants, Chris Godwin going off, Antonio Brown. I don't know if and when he'll be back, but I do think the Bucks are, yet again, the best team in the NFL. Just shows you how tight this gap is. You know, all these teams are very close, and we'll surely see more movement in the top 6 and of course throughout the rest of these rankings as we head into the season, but especially I think in the top really 5-6 teams there, a very tight race for who the true best team in the NFL is, which has been a big question in this unique NFL season that we've had here. Anyway, that's a tangent. Let's get out of here. Thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoy. Also, make sure you comment below. What are your rankings? Where do you agree? Where do you disagree? I appreciate you for watching. And until next time, peace out.